Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Van Ostren, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Primary Sources Uncovered, The United History of 68 Tribes, sponsored by Gale, Cengage, and featuring Dr. Donald Gilstrap, Dean of University Libraries for Wichita State University, and Andy Duran, Senior Manager of Market Development with Gale. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will also see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit your questions or comments. We will spend some time responding to your questions during the program, so please feel free to submit these throughout. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. Our featured speaker today is Donald Gilstrap, and he is joined by Andy Duran, who will also be moderating today's session. Andy?
Thanks, Jennifer, and again, welcome to everyone attending. We certainly appreciate your attendance. As Jennifer mentioned, my name is Andy Duran, and I've worked at Gale for nearly 7 years. During that time, I've held positions in sales as a strategic account executive and most recently as a senior manager of market development. When I'm not working with educators like yourselves across the country, I enjoy spending time with my wife and 3 kids, Ava, Grace, and Charlie. It is my pleasure as well to introduce you to today's featured speaker, Dr. Donald Gilstrap. Dr. Gilstrap is the Dean of University Libraries for Wichita State University, and after working as a coordinator of library instruction at the University of Central Oklahoma, Gilstrap left for the East Coast, working for the University of Connecticut's Information Technology Institute and the Connecticut Community College System as a library director in the late 1990s. Gilstrap then returned to Oklahoma to become Director of Libraries and Professor of Southwestern Oklahoma State University from 2001 to 2006. Having lived and worked in Oklahoma for over a decade, he became very familiar with the cultures, traditions, and histories of Native American tribes and remained in Oklahoma Territory after it became a state. Dr. Gilstrap returned to his native state of Kansas to join Wichita State University as Dean of University Libraries in 2011. Within the Wichita State University Libraries, he has been instrumental in remodeling the main Habla library, creating the learning commons, and implementing group and team-based technology areas for students. He has also received attention for his work acquiring rare materials and digitizing manuscripts and rare books for Wichita State University Library Special Collections. Most recently, he oversaw the addition of the Wichita State Library's 2 millionth volume, an extremely rare broadside of the Wyandotte Constitution of the state of Kansas. So with that being said, I was hoping, Don, that you would be able to start off by giving us a brief overview of the 5 collections that we're going to be featuring here today, and just tell us a little bit more information about them.
Sure, Andy, and thank you for that biography. One thing I'll point out, too, is I worked at the University of Oklahoma, too, so I was in the state of Oklahoma dealing with Native American tribes for many, many years. And coming back to Kansas was a real treat for me. One of the things I was looking for in a new job opportunity was the quality and caliber of the special collections. And Wichita State was one of those, buried gems out there in the plains. So within the collections that we were able to provide for Gale to be sourced for the Indigenous Peoples database, one was the W.S. Predaman photograph collection, and this contains photographs dating from 1885 to 1905 in Oklahoma Territory. And the photographs capture Native Americans, cowboys, as well as Native Americans who were cowboys, lawmen and outlaws, and also pioneers of the Oklahoma land rush. Predaman was originally from Arkansas City, Kansas, the city of my birth, but he later homesteaded near Blackwell, Oklahoma during the land rush. And this collection covers photographs of all the tribes that would have been relocated to Oklahoma Territory. And it's a little bit more natural than some of the stage photos that would have been seen at the local Five and Dime in the Wild West. So this was really more Native Americans in their natural environment. And the next collection is the Annette Hume photograph collection. And these were photos that were taken by Mrs. Annette Hume roughly around 1895 near Anadarko in Oklahoma Territory. And the photographs include images of, that detail things such as Quanah Parker, the grass house of Tawakoni Jim, who was chief of the Wichitas. There were photos of Kiowa children and their family in their natural environments, and as well as teepees and tents that the tribes would have used. Now, Mrs. Hume was actually the wife of Dr. Charles Robinson Hume, who had moved to Oklahoma Territory in 1890 to become the physician of the Anadarko Indian Agency. So she was connected to them on a daily basis. And also the photographs of the Kiowa, these are probably some of the best, I would even say, in the Hume collection, because they really show natural life among the tribes at that time. And these would have been, I would say, how Indians would have preferred that they be photographed, as opposed to a lot of the stage photographs that you see out there now. The next collection is the Great Nemaha Agency Collection, and this is comprised of letters from 3 agents who represented the Iowa tribe and the Sac and Fox tribe of Missouri. The Great Nemaha Agency of Nebraska was actually assigned to the tribe as their wards, and so they appointed John Burbank, Chauncey Norris, and Thomas Lightfoot as the Indian agents. And the letters date between 1866 and 1873, and they talk a lot about the usual duties of coordinating the materials that they needed for these tribes that had been relocated, whether it be farming supplements, livestock, different types of subsistence supplies, and just basic everyday needs. And the Great Nemaha Agency was actually headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was a Quaker-based agency. And one of the unique things about this was that they advocated for the role of native tribes that had been relocated to these territories. And this particular collection, of course, focuses on the Sac and Fox and the Iowa. And these are all handwritten journal entries. They were used for assessment purposes and to find out how the relocation was actually going for the tribes. And you also see personal emotion that's expressed in these letters, too, by the agents, that they worried that the tribes would fall apart after relocation, either socially or economically. And you see evolution take place in the writing among these agents, particularly among the Iowa tribe, that they were excelling at the agrarian lifestyle that they had been forced into. The next collection is the Charles Steve William Merton Hart papers. And he was actually an anthropologist at Wichita State University during the 70s. And this collection contains some really trend-setting cases of the Chippewa Indians. And they were making, at that time, convincing arguments about claims around geography and tribal economy. The Hart collection contains also the original legal briefs of the United States Court of Claims that was appealed by the Turtle Mountain Band of the Chippewa, as well as anthropological reports on the Red Lake and Pembina Chippewa. There's a 3-part report on the Indian health resources provided to the Chippewa tribes, as well as reports on the Blackfeet and the Gros Ventre tribes of Indians. The Hart collection really is pretty interesting because you see the battle that takes place among the Chippewa that stayed consistent throughout their relocation and new claims to lands. And basically you see the Chippewa not giving up, and it wasn't until the 20th century that they were really able to legally have the resources available to them to fight this battle on terms that actually ended up pretty well for that tribe. And then the last collection is the Janet Owens Laws collection. And this is an anthropological investigation of the reemergence of interest in Native American culture throughout North America, and particularly focusing on Kansas and the Southwest. And it shows the flourishing art and culture of Native Americans in the second half of the 20th century.
Great, thank you. I appreciate your overview there. And given some of your knowledge on these, your knowledge in each of these collections and your exposure to it, tell me a little bit about what you would call your favorite collection and maybe why you tend to have a preference towards it.
Oh, sure, Andy. I tell you, as a historian, I'm always looking for primary resources, and the ones that stand out to me the most personally is the collection of the Great Nemaha Agency. Many of the things that we've grown to expect out of government and society in the 20th century simply didn't exist in the 19th century. So as these tribes were actually relocated, we don't really think about the fact that they were pretty much just thrust into new territory without any help whatsoever and were expected to survive. So there was no aid for Native Americans at that point in time. And the Quaker Agency, the Great Nemaha Agency, actually turned out to be appointees that were wards for these tribes, and they actually were about the only advocates that those tribes had at the time. And they generally did their best to secure the tribe's well-being as well as funding that was promised to them. Now, at the beginning of the collection, you see in the late 1860s, many of these entries focused around simply making sure that the American government was actually giving the funds to the tribes that they had actually promised. So in this document right here, we see a letter from Norris to Denman, the commissioner, that they weren't getting their funds from the first quarter, and he had requested funds from the second quarter, and the commissioner hadn't sent the money for either one of the quarters to them by the beginning of January of 1869. This next document that we see here is just another example. This was a yearly report that was submitted from the Great Nemaha Agency agent, Thomas Lightfoot, to Samuel Janney. And he's actually starting to show that there is some progress that is being made, but still, because these funds are not available to them, they don't have any way to buy seed in order to do farming. They don't have money to actually build up basic infrastructure needs such as schools, and there's no U.S. government agent stationed anywhere near them on the reservation. So they're depending almost entirely on these annuities from the U.S. government for subsistence and clothing, and they're starting to get a little bit angry about this, and understandably so. Now you contrast that from 1869 by 1872, and of course I'm missing several documents in this evolution, but just showing you here that the report in 1872 by Thomas Lightfoot is basically saying that the Iowas have done a really good job. They've actually begun to really till the soil. They're farming. They have seed supplies, so they actually are starting to harvest and build reserves of seeds so they can actually farm for the next year. They're still requesting more housing, and they need money for that. The Quaker Agency has also been responsible about coming in and doing things such as vaccinations because, of course, when Native American tribes were relocated to other areas, they were hit with diseases that white settlers had that they had not come into contact with, and so this vaccination program was something that was detrimental to them, as well as cooking and storage of food, things like that. But as Lightfoot stresses in that letter, he says, they still need wagons and they need more farming implements if you want them to succeed. And so from his point of view, he said that the limited amount of funds that the Iowa had received from the federal government, they had actually done very well with it, and if they could just get the funds that were promised to them, they would turn out to be a very successful tribe. And we find out later within this collection, of course, they are, and from history of that, having been forced from their previous very successful kind of hunter-gatherer as well as trading society with the French and being forced into agrarian society. It's a whole new cultural experience for them, and they actually do quite well at it. And this is contrasted with the Sac and Fox tribe of Missouri. The tribe really, I think, had respectfully grown impatient with the U.S. government. They weren't getting their funds, they weren't getting their basic infrastructure needs being met, and that they were pretty much wanting to challenge this at the federal level. And what they wanted to do was sell the land that they had been moved to in Kansas and move to Indian Territory in the state of Oklahoma, where they thought that they would actually have better infrastructure needs met because there'd be more U.S. government agencies there, as well as other tribes to draw from wisdom and experience on. And they wanted to go, the chiefs of the Sac and Fox wanted to go to Washington and actually arrange for the sale of the lands that they currently held in Kansas and then redistribute those funds so they could buy land in Oklahoma Indian Territory.
Great, thank you. Now, in terms of talking about these for use on a day-to-day basis, could you share with us a little bit about how your faculty and scholars are using these materials, and in turn, how do the students benefit from using these sources, these primary source documents in their coursework?
Oh, absolutely. So far, faculty, and this is a relatively new product, so people are still learning it, but so far faculty are using it to support their own research and for creating curriculum that they can use within their classes here at Wichita State, as well as I'm sure at other universities across the country. These are also being used for upper-level undergraduate as well as graduate-level research methods classes, as well as classroom projects. And finally, we have the ability to actually do comprehensive thesis and dissertation research just from the Indigenous Peoples database.
Great, thank you. So, it begs the question, why digitize these collections, right? So for, what I didn't mention at the beginning is these original documents do reside in your library system at Wichita State, and a lot goes into that digitization process. Here, us at Gale come and invade your library space and take pictures, and it very much is a cumbersome process, and it can be very invasive for you. So tell me a little bit about those advantages and why, in your experience, you see the benefit of the digitization.
Oh, yes. I think that one of the biggest issues that all of us face with special collections, particularly focused on Native American tribes in North America, is that the print collections are somewhat of a diaspora that are held in different special collections across the country. And so, as a result, use of our print collections was not nearly as prolific, simply because for a person who is actually studying one particular tribe, you might have to go to 5 or 10 different institutions to look at the different holdings that were available in the print world. Obviously, on digitization, too, it's cost prohibitive for us. I think a lot of people don't take into account the amount of time that it does take to digitize, but also the description that is needed for that. We have done the metadata from the finding aid level, but Gale was actually to take this much farther and put it at the individual item level and with a lot greater description, which of course from a database framework, that makes it much more searchable for the user. For as far as practical aspects of this too, a lot of our students, they struggle between going to school full-time and then having to work jobs too. And the traditional, history student, as an example, taking a year-long research trip to go visit these different archives is just not as easy of an endeavor for our students. And so having all of these collections in one place and being able to do comprehensive research and investigation on tribes or society that are associated with Indigenous peoples has just been a real boon to the ability of them to be able to go out there and do research. So the impact just is unexplainable yet. We probably still have yet to see what's going to happen with that. But I would make the argument that you're going to see a lot more theses and dissertations that come out primarily using this database. Also I could probably say too that the features that are available within the database too, when we talk about that metadata, are just extensive. from the ways that you can do searches, the ways you can actually narrow down your searches and find the particular documents, and the ways that you can use the visualization features of it too, such as the photos and the metadata that's associated with that, et cetera. But, Andy, maybe this would be a good time. Why don't you talk a little bit more about some of the features that are available in the database?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. And actually, I just got kicked out. I was able to hop back in as a guest. So I don't know, Scarlett or Jen, if you're able to make me, there we go. Perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Don. I appreciate that. And really, I do want to take a little time and share with you ways in which we have added some extensive utility to this content. And so this is what the homepage looks like. And as you can see, there are a couple of different ways in which you can take a look at these collections. We have an area where you can simply explore the collection. So you can go in and look at them piece by piece and actually page through them if you'd like. It's sort of as though you're viewing them in their digital format, but you're sort of seeing them in their original state as well. So you actually have the ability to paginate, to go from one page to the next. We also have built in some things, one area called the term frequency, and that's an area that I'll actually show you a screenshot of here in a second. Talk to you a little bit about the idea around that term frequency wheel and also what your users can take away from that. But I think the biggest thing that we've allowed here is the ability to search across all these collections in one spot. So, if you don't have the desire or time to view each collection page by page, you can certainly do searches here and get results that are relevant to your searches. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the cool features that we've built in here because, again, I think that it speaks to the research process, and I think it speaks to the scholarship that our users are using this for and what that might look like. So what I have here on this screen is a frequency search, and essentially what this is doing. And I don't know if you can see it at the bottom here, but we have searched on the term school. And what this screen is showing us is the frequency, the number of documents by year that school shows up. So why is that important, right? So it's interesting because actually this isn't a live version, it's just a screenshot. But if I were to hover over each one of these little nodules there, it would actually give me the number of documents in that particular year. And it would also give me the results on the right-hand side, so I could actually see results that are referencing school in that particular year. What I like about this, though, is that you can actually add other search points over this graph. So oftentimes you can use that as a starting point for your research, or if you're an undergraduate doing any sort of research, you can use that as defining your thesis. So, for instance, if I were to do a search over this for war, you might see results that are inversely proportional to school. So in essence, this is showing you a redundancy of terms by year within this collection. Now, I've taken another screenshot here, and again, I apologize if this is a little small on your screen, but I'm going to do my best to point out some of the features and the benefits that go along with those features on this screen. So one of the things that I think is very nice that is provided in this product is the ability to have a named user function. So what that means is that any user can go in here and create their own username and password, and then within that, there's a utility to do a number of things. So in this particular case, you see there's a little yellow box on the screen. So essentially what I've done here is I've highlighted a corner of this picture, and then I can annotate and take notes on what I've highlighted here. And so you can kind of see over on the right-hand side, it says Kiowa, rack next to teepees. So I can take notes. And then if I'm signed in with my named user login, this information will actually travel with me to other Gale products if you have them, but also within this In addition, you can see I've also added some notes for this particular document at the bottom, but I can also do some tagging. So if I'm working on a specific project, I can tag this as the Kiowa project. And then as I collect different articles and tag them similarly, then I've sort of created a repository or a folder for that particular project that I can come back to under my named user login. In addition, there is a public tag section. Now, this is sort of interesting because essentially I could add a tag to this that is public for all users of this product. Now, fortunately, we have a large-scale editorial staff that monitors that to ensure, again, the scholarship of those tags. But certainly with the users that we have using this product, we haven't run into any concerns with any public tags that have been added. Now, next, I mentioned a second ago, I'm sorry, I forgot I built these nifty little arrows in here. But another thing that I wanted to point out, again, this is the term cluster search. So in this particular screen, we've done a similar search as when we were looking at that timeline, and we've simply done a search on schools, or actually in this case, boarding schools. So what this is doing is giving us a visual representation of the, I kind of like to think of it as the hierarchy of results. So your inner circle here, where it says Indian boarding school, Indian affairs, United States, day school, those are those slices of the pie are representative of the number of results that fall under boarding school, and then more specifically Indian boarding school. And then the outer layer is then showing us the results within both of those. So again, this is just a screenshot, but if I were in the live product and I were to roll my mouse here over Indian girls or Indian boys, the new results would populate on the right-hand side. So in a very quick visual setting, we've narrowed a search down to a much more granular level, but also we have the ability to see what other results are falling within those umbrellas of a larger search term. So again, really the idea here is to help drive the usage in a more appropriate direction for the research that's being done. And finally, I want to show you that this resource, the Indigenous Peoples North America, resides on our Gale Artemis Primary Sources platform. And within that platform, there are 12 different resources that are available. So many of you may be familiar with our ECHO 18th Century Collections Online or NECO 19th Century Collections Online. But we have Associated Press Collections Online, Making of Modern Law. So why do I mention that? If there are other resources within your library that you already have access to, along with this, you have the ability to cross-search those. And some of the utility and the function that I just mentioned would be applicable to those as well. And so in this particular case, I bring this up so that you can see that these 12 different databases can be searched together. What I also like about this, too, is that within these collections, for instance, like our Save in America, that's an older collection, that's an older product that we've had around for a long time. But with it being a part of this Artemis platform, we have actually re-indexed it so that searching them all together, we're going to get more universal results from product to product. So it's sort of like that product, which is on an older platform, still certainly the content has a lot of worth, now has the ability to be indexed and searched in this more dynamic and vibrant environment. Now, before I take you up on some questions, I want to mention as well that if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is an area that says File Share, and under that we have included a Gale Indigenous Peoples bifold brochure. So I wanted to encourage you all to click on that and download it if you so desire, and it's there for you, and please take it with you, give it some thought, and look at it for some more information. With that, though, I would like to open it up for some questions. I didn't see any questions in the chat box. But Jen, would you be able to open the lines up for anyone who might have questions for Scarlett? I believe your lines are open, so if you would like to ask some questions, please fire away. I'm sorry, I should have clarified. You can just type them into the participant view along the right-hand side. Well, if there aren't any further questions, I would, again, want to thank everyone for their attendance today. We certainly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule. And I'm sorry, it looks like we do have a question. Now, it looks as though we have a couple of questions that are now coming in. And the question is, for the handwritten letters from the Nemaha agency, does a transcription accompany those? You know what, that's a great question. I believe that they do in certain areas, you know. So here's the thing, we have a tool called OCR, which is optical character recognition, and essentially what that does is it takes a look at those handwritten letters and does a transcription of those and provides a textual version of it. I also have a request for a trial. We would absolutely be able to schedule a trial. I would encourage you to reach out to your Gale sales rep. If you don't know who your Gale sales rep is, please, I would encourage you to reply or respond to some of the follow-up communications that you get, and we'll be sure to point you in the right direction. Now, I have another question here that, Don, perhaps you might be able to answer, because I can't speak to it necessarily, but it looks as though someone has a question about the cost of digitizing content.
I'm looking for the question.
It looks like it's from Janet Wilkie.
Oh, for Wichita State, I'm not sure if the cost of digitization question is what does it cost in-house compared to what does it cost to have Gale do it? Is that the question? And then quick answer to that is Gale bears the brunt of the digitization cost for this project.
Right. There's also a question on here about plans to add additional collections. You know, that's a huge growth strategy for our company, and there certainly will always be desires to obtain collections such as the one in Don's library. And so while I can't officially announce any other collections specifically, that's certainly going to be areas that we're always adding to. There's also another question on here, Don, that you might be able to answer. The question's coming from Annette Nelson. Would you clarify if other colleges can access your collection?
And I'm not sure about the context. Sorry, the context behind the question, but other colleges can definitely access our print collections. One thing about the Indigenous Peoples database, of course, it is a subscription database like the other Gale products, So yeah, you would need to have access via subscription in that aspect. But yes, the print collections are available for researchers to go use at Wichita State University.
Okay. Now, there are a couple other questions in here that I want to make sure I can get answered, but for our intents and purposes today, I don't know that I have the best answers to them. So I see that there's a question on here about how Gale decides which collections to consider adding to Indigenous Peoples. I want to talk to one of our product folks on that, because I can certainly surmise and speak to some of those things, but I just want to make sure that I'm not misstating, and I could speak to that a little more eloquently to you. So what's nice here is we should have a transcript to these questions and answers, and you can count on me to follow up with you individually on what some of those answers are. And the same goes for looking into the collections and geographically where they reside. This collection is for North America exclusively. The bulk of the content that's in here is Midwest and West, but again, I will look into geographically what other collections are in there and give you a much more detailed answer on that. Dr. Gilstrap, it looks like there's another question here for you, and it's asking, what do you do for outside researchers who wish to access the digital collection?
Oh, that's a great one. Obviously, because of our arrangement with Gale on how we actually license our databases, that the institutional computers that are available at Wichita State University are in the IP range that's authenticated by Gale. So outside researchers that come into the WSU libraries have access to the Gale product from on-site.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? I'm just trying to look through here and see if there are other ones that I haven't had an opportunity of answering. I don't know the answer to this, but Dr. Gilstrap, perhaps you do. We have another question from Annette Nelson about, she says, are the Fox and SAC a combination of several bands?
I'm not sure if the question is for our particular collection or just generally about the Sac and Fox Nation. And there are several bands of the Sac and Fox Nation. The collection that exists in the Great Nemaha Agency collection is the Sac and Fox of Missouri tribe.
I do see another question on here too in regards to non-academic subscriptions, whom to contact. I would also encourage you to go to the Gale website, and there is a rep locator on there, and you should be able to input your geography and where you reside and all that, and it should tell you the appropriate person to speak to. Additionally, I would encourage you, if that isn't yielding the results that you're looking for, I would encourage you calling 800-877-4253. That is Gale's 800 number, and they can certainly point you into the right direction. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I again want to thank you all for joining us today. We certainly appreciate, again, you taking your time out of your schedule to meet with us and hear what we have to say. So without further ado, I want to turn it back over to Jennifer. And again, thank you so much for your attendance.
Thanks, Andy. Well, it looks like we're ready to wrap up our time together, and I would like to give a virtual round of applause to our presenters today for sharing some useful information. We greatly appreciate spending your time with us. And as a reminder to our attendees, we have recorded today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from ACRL and Choice that will include instructions on how to access the archived version. Thanks again to all our participants for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the session, and have a great rest of